But this is what it's all about. It's all about the hunt. It's all about going to get a new bike. It's all about the unknown. You don't know what the bike's going to be like. What's it going to take to fix it? I have been searching for a 84 200es Big Red. I've had many of them, probably more than any of the other models. It is the most common bike, most produced bike, three-wheeler ever made. 218,000 or something like that in one model year, 84. 84 special. First year of shaft drive. It is the first year of reverse. It's the only year that offers high-low and reverse. In 85, is what is marked on the case as SL, super low. But that's an 85. The 83, all you had was high and low, no reverse. So that's why when the 84 came out, it really changed the market. Reverse was something that the people needed to back into a trailer, to back up, to turn around on a trailhead that's run out. Just a lot of reasons you could use the reverse and not have to get off the bike and push it. A lot of people, didn't like that. You got stuck. You had to get off the bike and push it because it didn't have reverse prior to that. So the 84 is special. I like it. I think it's a good size unit. It's kind of right in the middle of the run. Remember, they started making these in 79 and ended in 88, 87, depending on who you're talking to. So here we are right in the middle of the production, and it, to me, has the most features available on a three-wheeler. All around, all the basic amenities that you look for in a modern ATV were on this bike. So to find one in relatively good shape, this one is not running. That's how I buy them. That's how I can afford them. It looks good in the pictures. But I can tell in the photos, and after talking to the gentleman, it's not running and hasn't run in a long time. But that's okay. It's a complete bike. When you're looking for a bike, that's what you want. The more complete the bike is, the better off you are. You will spend a fortune trying to find nuts and bolts and covers and little pieces and parts because the bike you purchased wasn't complete. We are loaded up. We are headed home. We got us an 84 Honda 200es Big Red. Pretty much what the fella said it was. There's a few things he didn't disclose, but that's all part of buying something used. So you buy used stuff at cheap prices, and you can expect that. But that's all right. We're going to tear it apart. We're going to fix it, put it back together. Take a look at this. Took a little trailer with us. They'll fit in the back of a pickup truck, but you never know. This old boy had two Big Red 250ESs and a 110. He didn't want to come off of anything else, so I think he felt he got the better deal getting rid of this one. But he had a nice little collection. All right, we just got her home. 1984 Honda 200ES Big Red, most popular three-wheeler ever produced. I believe they made 218,000 or 230,000. I don't know. It was a ridiculous amount for one model year. This is my favorite year. I've explained that before. This is a transition year. This is where they go from the 200cc engine to the 250cc engine in the next model year. This is the first year of the shaft drive. If you look, a couple things to note. Rear differential here. It's the only year that it looks like this. It's got an aluminum case. The next year is a shaft drive. It's completely different. You would have a ring and pinion on this side on the shaft drive. But this one's centered, and so it's aluminum housing. If you get a picture of one online and not sure what it is, it's a telltale sign this is the only year with this rear differential in it. We've talked about it before. The starter location, a 200cc engine has a starter in the front. Here, it's in the front of the engine. The 250cc class has a starter in the rear. The only bike that rule doesn't apply to is the 85-86 Honda 125M. It's a completely different bike. It's a two-year only bike too. So this is what you look for. This is a this is kind of a barn find, if you will. Old boy had it, you know, the story goes, it ran when I parked it. It's been sitting a long time, not too long, probably a year or so. I wouldn't think any more than that. Somebody's put tires on it. They're dry rotted, so they've got some age to them. A couple things to look for. You know, these front ends, they all lock up. I'm sure this one is too. Yep, it is. So a couple things. So buyer's guide. When you're looking for a three-wheeler, these particular models, what we call the hardtail, means it has no rear suspension in the back. Couple things to look for when you get to the bike. Completeness is everything. You want to buy the most complete bike you can possibly find. If it's missing parts, you probably don't want it. As you see, a couple of things here. We've got some wiring that's undone, so that's a sign that somebody's been in here, or at least neglect, if nothing else. So these are the two lights for the dash here. It's not a big deal, but it's something. That said, the pull rope's out of this bike. As you see here, the spring is probably broke on the inside. On top of that, the handle's gone too. Not a big deal, but when I went to pick it up, I couldn't spin the engine over, so I'm taking a chance on it. I'm guessing it's locked up. I just plan on that. A couple of things else that are missing. The gear selector is missing on the left side there. Not an issue for some, but if you plan on riding it this afternoon, that would certainly be a problem. Now, I drove an hour and a half to get this bike. The guy sent me some really good pictures, but he did not disclose that the rear end was locked up until I got there. So not real happy about that, but we'll figure it out. If it's the brake, that's a good thing. Looks like somebody's been in the brake. You look here, things to look for. See this silicone hanging out of here? All right, under the rear differential, somebody's been in here. Somebody's either put brakes on it or took brakes off of it or something, who knows. We'll find out together. Muffler's intact, looks like. It's rusted up pretty good. The fenders is why I bought this bike. Hey, look, there we go, surprise. Gear shifter. Well, we just saved $15 right there. And a Bud Light can. So we'll recycle that and we'll make another penny. But these fenders are great. They are really, really good shape. As you can tell, the seat's shot. At least the cover is, but the base is good. So airbox is intact. That's always something to look for. This is your airbox here. You want to try to make sure you can find that it's intact. Wiring seems to be in overall pretty good shape. I don't see a lot of cuts or splices or electrical tape or anything like that. I don't think anybody's really monkeyed with this bike too much. I think it quit moving for whatever reason, and then they left it. Probably the brake locked up on it from sitting. You know, the seller might not even have known that. They might have parked it because it quit running, and then you know, let it sit for a year. And then when I come along, they go to move it, and they find out that the rear end's locked up at that point in time. So I'm not mad. That's part of selling stuff. But that said, the tank's in good shape. There's a dent here on this side. Now remember, I don't restore these bikes. I make runners out of them, riders out of them. That's it. I don't expect them to be mint condition or perfect in any way. But when you go to look for a bike, these generation bikes, go ahead and count on the front end being locked up. And what I mean by that is there's a spring inside this shock, if you will. It's really not a shock. It's more of a captured spring that just bounces up and down. There was fluid in them originally, but not like a modern day shock. And so if you're going to get one of these bikes, and what I mean by that, if you get a 200E or a 200ES, either plan on swapping the front end out with a 200S or a 200, or just living with it. Either way, it's going to ride rough. There's no suspension on the front in this configuration. If you look really close, this is even looks like it's bent, and what that is these bushings that are in here completely wore out. They're shot, and so there's an inner and outer to these shocks, and it's gotten cocked in there and it's locked up. So if you were to ride it right now, it would just bounce, and you know, it'd be like a hard tail, hard front end. Unfortunately, you cannot rebuild these. They don't make these bushings anymore. If you can find new old stock, great. But for the cost of a different front end, you can put a 200s front end on here for $200, and buy a whole bike for that matter. So that's the way to go. If you have a 200M front end, is ideal, and the reason being, a lot of guys don't catch this until it's too late, is a 200M will give you a 9-inch wheel. So the 9-inch wheel gives you the same size rims and tires, the same bolt pattern front and rear, because the 200M is the little brother to the Big Red. They only made it in 84 and 85. So that's ideally the best front end. If you can find a 200 or a 200S, the front ends will fit, but you'll have an 8-inch rim in the front, and that's not a problem. Just when you buy your tires, you get an 8 in the front of a 25 on an 8-inch wheel versus a 25 on a 9-inch wheel on the rear. Other than that, there's really no difference. It's not wrong or right, it's just different. It works fine. The 200S front end is a great front end. It has a traditional shock that what we're used to in a modern bike. So that's a good upgrade. Even if these worked but squeaked or worked poorly, that would still be worth the time and investment to swap the front end out. Now, if you had a 200X front end laying around, that would bolt on here also, and that would give you a true off-road suspension front end. You would net an 11-inch wheel, the skinny wheel, which is what a lot of guys like, and it would also give you a disc brake in the front, which is a huge upgrade over the drums. Now, that being said, what have you built? You got a hardtail, which is the worst rear end, meaning it rides the worst, and then you have a sport front end, which is the best. So you've got kind of an odd combination. So I personally would keep a 200X front end on a 200X. Checked the oil, and the oil was black, which is good, but all this clear stuff coming out of this case is not good. So what we've got here is hopefully the hopefully the water did not get over to the, hopefully the crank seal was good enough and kept the water out. Because we didn't find any water in the oil, we're probably going to be all right. But I have never seen that much water come out of a pull rope assembly. Well, now we know why it probably locked up. Is that much water inside it? That spring probably rusted solid. That's funny. You never know what you're gonna find. So we know the plug's out, and a little while ago we sprayed some lubricant down on top of the piston. We've been letting that soak for about 2 hours. Now, I'm not going to put any power to this motor yet. I want to try to get the rear end transmission in neutral if I can. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's great. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that the engine's not locked up. Also going to give me an opportunity. Should be able to get this I don't know if the synchronizers are going to let me do it from the engine side or not. We may still have to pull the rear end down. or the brake assembly off. I shouldn't have said that. She's bound up good, but the motor is not locked up. That's great. Okay, well, that's promising. That is really promising. So, since it's not locked up, I'm going to go one step further. And see if we've got any compression. That's always your next thing you want to check. You know, motor's not locked up, great. Now you need to verify what kind of compression you have. Now we've done this on another video, but I do it on every bike that comes in. It tells you what's going on inside the engine before you spend a lot of time and money chasing other issues. This one test will tell you if you've got a decent motor or not. Now, like we said, you know, there's a lot of variables to this. Everybody's gauge is going to read a little different. Valve guides and seals. You know, this bike hasn't run in a long time, so it's very possible. You know, they're dry. They're not going to seal up. We just want a baseline. Okay, we broke 90. That's good, that'll work. So, like I said, these bikes run about 150 PSI, is about where they are. Some say 160, give or take. 100 is good. You know, 75 we may run, but it's going to smoke. 100 is about the minimum you really want. Anything less than 100, I'd recommend a rebuild on it. You know, if you want to, if you feel like you can put the money into it, and go from there. So we're doing well. The motor's not locked up. It does have compression. So let's see if we've got spark. Yeah. Take the plug and put in your wire, in your spark plug wire. I lay it across something metal, something rusty. In this case, you know, you can lay it across this exhaust manifold. All we're looking is for spark, which spark should jump right here across the outer electrode and the ground strap. So I'm going to jump the bike again, and let's see if we've got spark. I don't see any spark. Basically what Honda did is they ran the harness from the frame into the back of the headlight, and they ran the harness from the handlebars into the back of the headlight, and the headlight housing, which is this red part here, kind of does double duty. It holds the headlight, but it's also kind of a junction box if you're into electrical work. It's a junction box for your two harnesses. Now, I'm going to disconnect this, the blue wire and the white wire, or your headlights. One is high and one is low. Green, of course, is ground. And I'm going to put the headlights somewhere safe. You like that? You see the water in there? Yeah. Okay. But that doesn't mean the bulb is bad. Now, pay attention when you pull these big reds off, these headlights off. You see these little sliders, these nuts here. They're captured, but they're not locked in place. They just slide in and out. So when you go to remove this housing, they fall on the floor and you lose them. So keep that in mind. Now what I'm going to do, just because I'm going to tear this bike apart anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to push this harness back out through this little rubber grommet here on the back, which is kind of your protection. That is a really nice part. I am very pleased about that. That housing, they reproduce those. There's a guy on threewheelerworld.com. Y'all know that's some friends of mine over there. A lot of good guys. There's a guy over there. He is making those on a 3D printer. So if you're looking for one, and it doesn't have to be original equipment, then by all means, check that out. He's got them up on eBay right now. I have no affiliate with him. I'm just kind of giving him a free plug. So sometimes you just got to go back to the basics. We're going to trace this signal all the way out, and we're going to find out where it stops, and wherever it stops is the part we need to change. So I've just got a test light. It's grounded to the head. All right. So we've got a stator that is creating current. I want to make sure that kind of felt funny. I want to make sure that's not broken. All right. All right, so just going to hook that back up the way it was. So that's our black wire with a red tracer. And it basically follows the main harness, and it comes right up here to the top of your CDI. I'm going to take it and I'm going to find out if we got current going into the CDI the exact same way. You can take the CDI off and you can pin it out from the other direction. We're just going to take a very small test light, and you don't want to mess up the plug. Hope you saw that. All right, so now we know we've got current going to the CDI. The CDI is receiving a signal that it needs, but it may not know when to discharge that signal. So what you want to find out is you want to find out on your rotor here in your cap. We need to find out what's going on in there. Phillips screwdriver. An ohm meter, you can run an ohms test across that. Not quite sure of the resistance. I kind of have a cheat sheet over there. I just want to look in here. Now before you strip these out, if you've got one that you can't get a really good screwdriver. Out of all the screws on this bike, that one strips out more than any of the rest. And I've drilled them out, I've retapped them, I've had to do all of that. So make sure this particular screwdriver, there's nothing special about it. For whatever reason, it fits really good in there. I'm gonna be surprised if what's in here and what's not in here. Okay, well, looks like everything's intact. I can see that it's full of mud. That's always good. So what I'm thinking possibly is the CDI is receiving a signal from the stator, which is good, because the stator's, out of all of these components, the stator is the one you don't want to have to mess with. So I'm going to pay real good attention here. You can go ahead and roll the engine if you want, if it's your first time. Ah, look at that. I think we may have found our problem. Watch real close. See this nut right here? I'm going to turn this crank with a screwdriver. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. All right, so I think here's our problem. Back up so you can see. As I turn this with a screwdriver, this stator, this magnet here should spin, and it's not. All right, I can tell you what that is. That's our problem. So what's happening, we've been spinning this bike and I've been checking all these other components, and I should have came here. What's happening is this is not turning, and if this is not turning, it doesn't, the bike doesn't know when to fire at all. Right? Okay. So I'll go over this real slow and we'll edit the video so you can follow along. This is a 12 millimeter here, isn't it? No, 10, excuse me. 10 millimeter. All right, that was not tight, but that's not the problem. The problem is going to be the little pin on the bottom of this assembly. What's happened more than likely is that pin's come out. It's just a little teeny tiny pin. I hope it's still in here. I hope we can find it. If not, I'll go get one out of another junk bike, or excuse me, parts bike. Don't tell my wife I called them junk bikes. They're parts bikes. in the other video, we found a washer right there, that little washer on there, in the bottom of the case on that other bike. So this is our magnet, or excuse me, our pickup ring. Oh yeah, somebody's been in here big time. Okay, so that is cool. This is why I do this. This is a discovery. It's it's mechanicking, but it's also you don't know what you're gonna find. I've never seen this before. This is really cool. I hope y'all find this kind of stuff cool. So this is our magnet. Wow, that is stuck on there. It should not be stuck on there like that. So what's happened is this entire assembly has come apart completely. Wow, that's wild. So I'm just going to pull it out of here. There we go. Okay, and that's why we weren't getting any spark. I don't see our pin either. I hope we can find that pin. So what's happened, and I've seen some of this, but never all of this. So here's what's happened. I'll explain it to you. So this is our magnet here. Every time that comes around, that's what the pickup sees, and so spark, 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 spark. That's how it works. So that rides on this assembly here, and this assembly is actually what controls your advance. As the engine turns up in speed, these are weights here, and these weights fly out. And there's two springs that ride here and here, okay? And those springs, when the bike slows down, brings these in. And what that does is that changes the advance, and it advances the engine or retards the engine based on speed. And these are just little limiters. Now, in the other engine, it's funny, I've never seen this before. In the other engine, one of these was missing an E-clip, and we were able to change it, and we didn't find any damage. That's a good thing. But both of these E-clips are gone. One of the springs is completely missing. The other spring, here's a little, nothing of it. That's one of the springs. So these springs, I don't know what they're made out of. I guess they're a spring steel, duh. They deteriorate over time, and this one has slung the weights out. It probably backfired and coughed real bad and then shut down, because once it lost its ability to spark, it wasn't running. So, excuse me. All right, so here's our problem. This is what you need. These springs I get over, they're actually Honda for springs. I get them over at partszilla.com. I'm not affiliated with them. They just have Honda parts, and probably some of the best prices you're going to find on a Honda part. So I've pulled this assembly. Ooh, that was close. I almost screwed up. All right, so here's what we were missing. First off, we were missing that little pin right there. Can you see that? That pin. That dowel pin sits inside your cam. There's a little bitty hole right inside the cam here. Now, because the timing chain's hooked up, if you're not real familiar with how these work, I'm gonna roll, I can turn the engine just like this by turning the, remember the spark plug's out of it too. If you look really close, and you see the little hole in there, there's a little hole right there in the cam. That little hole is where this little pin goes. And I'm going to tell you, you do not want to drop this little pin. Now, some of the things that I've learned over the years, a pair of needle nose pliers work. Sometimes it's just your fingers is the best tool you got. I got to put this camera down. All right, so a little bitty pair of needle nose pliers. You can hold just the very end of that pin, and I mean it ain't no bigger than a minute. Y'all see that? All right. Now holding that with the pliers, you can go right in there, you can kind of drop it in its hole. Or you can drop it on the floor or wherever. Get a good grip on it. And you're gonna want to take it right out to the very edge. Now, once you get it in there, it needs to be square, and it can get cocked, kind of wonky, and then push it down in there. Now, y'all saw how small that pin was. Half of that pin is actually pushed down inside. Can you see it now? See that little pin way here in the back, right there? That's all that it sticks up. And what that sits on, or what that does, is on the back of your weight mechanism, there's an indentation right where my thumb is, okay? Now I'm not going to use this one, I got another one, but I'm going to show you how it goes on. See how it went in? Right now it's not in all the way. Watch as it drops in. Right there, okay. Now on the other video I explained to you that if that pin is in the 11 o'clock orientation, not straight up and down, but at 11 o'clock, then that's going to be top dead center. Okay, that's where this needs to be. So also what's missing on this bike is those springs that we talked about in another video. So I went out to the boneyard and I grabbed another assembly here. The springs are missing on it too. I actually needed them on another project. This is a common failure. What happened, more than likely, this bike was being ridden and it was running a little rough, but you know, hey, it's old, so they just kept riding it. And it started probably backfiring and popping a little bit as they give and take away the accelerator, because it wasn't advancing properly. The weights were slung out and they weren't coming back in when the bike decelerated. So what I'm gonna do, this one's already got E-clips on it like it's supposed to. The other one's missing E-clips and I don't have any today. So I'm gonna put springs on here. I'm gonna show you where they go and we're gonna install it, and I think we're gonna have this bike fixed. So hold on just a moment. All right, so here's our assembly with the springs and the weights cleaned up and new springs on. I gave you the part number of that just a moment ago. So now what you're going to want to do is you want to make sure you're going to take your, this would be your magnet or your rotor. Blue jeans, they're great, aren't they? Make sure it's cleaned up. And what you're going to want to do is you can put this in 180 out, meaning you can put it in correctly or you can put it in completely wrong way. So the way I do it is I go ahead and I set this assembly in first because it can only go in one way. This little notch is going to index with that little pin that we just stuck on the cam. All right, like that, and it drops into place. Now it's locked into place. Now I know that that pin's at 11 o'clock, so I know that the magnet, which is going to be the end that has the little line on it, needs to be at 12 o'clock. Okay, so knowing that, I can go ahead and spread these little weights out just a little bit, and this will drop right into place on a good day. There you go. Okay, so just as we said, it can only go in two ways, correct or 180 out. So we know this is correct because our pin location is at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock on the pin, 12 o'clock on the magnet. Now we're going to take our, this is our pickup. Okay, every time that magnet comes around is when that fires. There's a particular bolt, it's a 10 millimeter. It goes in the nose of the cam here. It has a flat washer on it, and that's what retains the rotor. So I'm going to tighten that down just a little bit. Do not overdo that. I'm going to tighten it up by hand because I don't want to break it off inside the cam. You break that off in the cam, you're going to be looking for a new cam. Okay, so we've got our springs in there. Now I'm going to tighten down this ring. We're going to make sure that there's no interference. The distance you want off of that ring to the magnet is about the thickness of a business card. If you don't know what a business card is, close. Make it really close, but not touching. This is where you can adjust your timing a little bit. There's not a lot of room here underneath this cap, so you really can't get crazy with the time, and you may pick up a degree here or there. If you've got a bike that maybe is a little hard to start, you may try advancing it just a little bit. And so, and what your limiting factor is the cover that covers this has a little cap, has a little ridge on it, a flat spot. This little area here goes on the top. And as you see, by moving it here, you can only move that box so far because it's going to hit. It's not going to be able to advance anymore. So when you're chasing a problem, try to always go to the source of your electric current, which in this case was the stator. We verified stator, we followed that wire up, we verified it was going to the CDI. Like I told you, less than 10% of the problems, or 10% of the bikes that have come in here, and that's a lot, have needed a CDI box. I've showed you a few things to check, but ultimately, most of the time, the problem is going to be something other than the CDI. I put the original coil that came with the bike, but this is not the original coil. If the bike does not fire now, if we don't get any spark, then I'm going to go back to checking the coil, but I think this is going to do it. All right. I'll leave the cover off so you can see what I'm doing here and how that works. All right, so here's what we got. We got our clipped gray wire, which is our reverse kill, not let you start it in reverse wire, the gray wire. Just got it cut off, don't need it. I've replaced the coil. That really seems to be the secondary problem with this bike. Not only did we have exploded advanced weight system and missing springs, and the bolt was loose, and just a whole bunch of problems inside the stator. CDI is fine. Just like I was saying, most of these, the CDI is actually hardly ever the problem. The coil was bad. I tried a aftermarket coil, and I'm going to show you what we got here. Aftermarket coil has 2 wires, and the body actually itself is a floating ground. So you ground the green wire, and you ground the chassis of the harness to it also. So I've got it clipped to the frame where the factory ground is. This is just temporary. And then the black wire with the yellow tracer is the signal wire. That signal comes over, gives the power to the coil, tells the coil to spark. So I'm going to turn this where you can see it. I've cleaned the frame a little bit here so we get a good ground, and I'm just going to jump the bike like I do. And as you see, it's shocking me. So there you go. If you look real close, we have spark. Now, that is awesome. So we verified from the get-go, the bike is not locked up. We know we have compression of over 90 PSI. And that's after it's sitting a long time. That compression is going to come up as the rings reseat, as the cylinder wall gets clean again. It could certainly come up several more points, which is just going to make it that much better of a bike. Now, I have not cleaned this carburetor. I have no idea what kind of gunk is in it. I did verify that the throttle, if you listen close, I can hear it. The throttle is bottoming out. We talked about runaways, how important it is to be able to turn a bike off. It's probably more so important than getting it running. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take some fuel in a can, and we're going to make this thing run. Now, this is all just verifying what works and what doesn't. We still got an issue with the rear axle. We don't know if it's going to be brakes locked up or if it's going to be the rear diff is locked up. I've had 6 of these, and I've never had a rear differential problem on this model. Now, I have had problems on the 300 four-wheelers, but never on the 200 Big Reds. I'm hoping that my luck holds out. We'll see. I'm counting on a stuck brake drum. That's what I'm counting on. That's what I'm hoping on. Let's say that. All right, so we've got fuel going to the carb. That's good. We just wanted to bust off and run a little bit so we can feel good about what we've done today. So here we go. You ready? I'm ready. Now to turn this off, I'm going to pull the coil from the frame. I won't get shocked here, and it will kill the engine if it were to go run away from us. Okay, we had a spark.
tapping. Valves need adjusted, something bad. Timing chain too. But that's alright. Smoking a little bit. It's not wanting to run. Excuse me, it's not wanting to idle. All the way out. There you go. How's that? Honda Big Red, 1984. She's smoking, but she's running. She's running on her own. That's why I do this. That right there is the whole reason why I do it. So alright, we went hunting this morning. Found a 84 200es Big Red. Drove a little over an hour and a half to get it, or right at an hour and a half to get it. I bought it for the fenders. The fenders are great on this bike. The color's good. There's a few scratches, but there are no breaks. There are no cracks. That's why I got it. The tank is good. It's usable. It's got a few dents in it, but it's clean on the inside. The motor runs. It needs a top end, but they all do. Probably gonna need clutches. I did get the back end of the rear end to spin. The brake is locked up on it. That's a job. We'll tackle that later. But we got it running. We found out what was wrong with it. First, it was stuck in gear. Being stuck in gear, it wasn't creating any spark. Then we found out that the rotor was all messed up. The springs were going. The advances had come apart. I mean, I've never seen one come apart. Both E-clips were missing. It was a mess. So we replaced that. We dialed it in with a new coil. The coil was bad. So this bike had a lot of small problems, and they just kind of added up to be a really big problem. I like to take and look at the bikes as kind of a mystery. You know, I got to solve it. What was it doing when it quit? As much mud as in this one, it was in the mud. And it was somebody was riding it, and somebody was having a really good time. And more than likely that rotor come apart, and when it did, she lost spark and she just died. Probably sitting, you know, as long as it did, that took its toll on it as well. This is my favorite bike, the 84. When I think of a Big Red, this is what I think of. When someone says, I have a Big Red, or you know, my dad had a Big Red, or my uncle had a Big Red, this is what I think of. This tank, this sticker, this bike was just the top of the line when I was a kid. And so it will always have a soft spot. I will always have a soft spot for this bike. I'm glad to have another one in the house. Like I said, I've had several of these over the year. But I think I'm gonna hold on to this one. I think I'm done getting rid of them for a while. So look forward, we're gonna do some comparison videos. I'm gonna line them up tomorrow and kind of show you the differences of them. But thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you had fun. It's always a challenge, and I like figuring out what it is, you know, to fix it. If you like what I'm doing, you know, hit the subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. If you need some help, you know, write a comment down at the bottom. I've had a couple of guys, you know, write in that said, you know, they had problems. We were able to email back and forth. I was able to help them out, and, you know, they're up and riding now. So that's great. I'm glad to help out, you know, pretty much any way I can. But Thanks for watching. If you need a part that you see on the video, check the description. I have links to all the parts that I use. Pistons, top end kits, timing chains, pretty much all of your basic replaceable parts. Brake shoes, air filters, carburetors, tires, all of that can be found in the description. So take a moment and look through there. If you're needing something, you can follow that link. Again, that helps me out, and hopefully it'll help you out too.